Dear Santa, love Phoebe. December 24th, 2020. Dear Santa,
I'm lonely.
I think I've officially lost it. I mean, here I am, writing a letter to a fictional character at 34. I never even wrote to you as a kid. What am I doing? Anyway, Santa, I've been bad. Really bad. I've broken hearts. Mine included. But you're supposed to know everything, right? So maybe this is just me confessing. They say it's good for the soul or whatever. To be honest, I don't think I've slept in a year. Is it sad that the only person I feel like talking to is you? A children's story? Well, I did say I'm lonely. Let me explain. It started with Ellie. Do you remember her? Of course you do. She's the kind of person who probably baked you cookies well into adulthood. We met in primary school. Instant best friends. We were the pair everyone joked about, inseparable like salt and pepper. Even when we went to different secondary schools, we somehow kept bumping into each other at coffee shops or concerts. And every time we picked up where we left off like no time had passed. Fast forward to university. We met again at some random art exhibit, and that was it. With phones in our hands and freedom on the horizon, we rented a tiny flat in Edinburgh together. Life was perfect. I had Ellie back. I had Sarah, my girlfriend at the time. Everything was falling into place. Until it all unraveled. 6 years ago, Ellie and I hosted our annual Christmas Eve party. The flat was buzzing with friends, music, and mulled wine. Everything was normal, until Ellie pulled me aside into her room. Her face was serious. "Are you okay?" I asked. She nodded. "Yeah, I need to ask you something." The next thing I knew, she was down on one knee, holding out a velvet box. "Will you marry me, Phoebe?" I laughed, nervously, 'cause surely this was a joke. It had to be. But then she said, "I love you. I've always loved you." I froze. She knew about Sarah, of course, but this wasn't about Sarah. This was about the truth I wasn't ready to face. So I ran. Out of her room, out of our flat, straight to my parents' house. I didn't go back until January. When I finally returned, Ellie was there. She smiled at me like nothing happened, even though I could see the pain in her eyes. We went back to being normal. We avoided the elephant in the room, and for a while it worked. I told myself I wasn't the bad guy, I was just confused. And then Sarah cheated on me. Left me. Ellie was there to pick up the pieces. She always was. She held my hand, made me tea, and stayed up all night talking about nothing just to distract me. That Christmas Eve she proposed again. Same ring. Same question. This time I didn't run. I just said, "Ellie, stop." But she didn't stop. Not that year. Not the next. By the fourth time, I didn't even let her finish. I was angry. I said things I regret. And she still forgave me. Last year I lost my mum. That's what finally did it, shook me awake. Life is short, Santa. Too short for lies. Too short to keep running from yourself. I realized I was in love with Ellie. I always had been. I didn't know when it happened, but it didn't matter. It was true. So I made a plan. This year I'd say yes. I'd tell her everything. I bought a ring, one I thought she'd love. But when I went to her flat, strangers opened the door. She'd moved out weeks ago. I called her brother, desperate to find her. His voice cracked when he told me she was gone. Gone, Santa.
À car accident.
She was on her way to volunteer at the shelter, like she did every Christmas Eve. I didn't even know she still went. I dream about her every night. I wake up hoping it's all a lie. But it's not. I know you're not real. I know you can't grant wishes. But if you could, please tell Ellie I'm sorry. Tell her I love her. Tell her I'm trying to be good for her. Yours truly, Phoebe. The letter lay on the windowsill untouched. Outside, snow fell softly over the cobbled streets of Edinburgh. The world was quiet, save for the occasional car passing in the distance. Phoebe sat by the fire, clutching Ellie's old scarf. It still smelled faintly of lavender and pine. "I hope you heard me," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Somewhere in the night, a star shone a little brighter. Phoebe sat in the dim light of the fireplace, her gaze locked on the flickering flames. The scarf in her hands was fraying at the edges, worn from years of Ellie's love and now her own grief. Her words hung heavy in the air. She reached for the ring box on the coffee table, the one she had bought for Ellie. She opened it for the 1,000th time, the simple silver band glinting faintly. "I was too late," she whispered. Outside, the snow thickened, blanketing the streets in white. A soft knock at the door broke the silence. Phoebe blinked, confused. It was nearly midnight on Christmas Eve. She wasn't expecting anyone. Rising slowly, she padded to the door and hesitated. For a fleeting moment, she imagined Ellie standing on the other side, her warm smile and sparkling eyes waiting to greet her. But reality bit, and she steeled herself against the foolish thought. When she opened the door, a gust of icy wind greeted her. A young woman stood on the stoop, bundled in a bright red coat and clutching a brown envelope. "Phoebe Hart?" the woman asked, her breath visible in the cold. Phoebe nodded. "I'm sorry to bother you so late, but this is for you. From Ellie." Phoebe's heart stopped. "What?" "She left it with me a few months ago," the woman explained. "She said to deliver it on Christmas Eve if anything ever happened to her." Phoebe's hands trembled as she took the envelope. "Who are you?" "Just a friend," the woman said with a kind smile. "Merry Christmas." She turned and disappeared into the snow. Back inside, Phoebe sat by the fire staring at the envelope. Ellie's handwriting was unmistakable on the front. "To Phoebe on Christmas Eve." She held her breath as she opened it, her fingers clumsy with nerves. Inside was a letter and something small and wrapped in tissue paper. She unfolded the letter first. "Dear Phoebe, if you're reading this, it means I'm not there to say it in person. I'm sorry for that. I hope you'll forgive me. I've loved you for as long as I can remember. And I know I scared you off pushing too hard too soon. That wasn't fair to you. But I couldn't stop loving you, even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. You've always been my heart, Phoebe. You've been my home. This year I won't ask you to marry me. I won't ask you anything. Instead, I'm leaving you this." The small bundle of tissue paper caught Phoebe's eye. She unwrapped it carefully, revealing a delicate silver necklace. The pendant was a tiny snowflake, its edges sparkling like frost. Ellie's letter continued. "This necklace reminded me of you. Unique, beautiful, and more resilient than you think. Wear it and remember that you're stronger than your fears. I don't know what the future holds, but I hope it's kind to you. You deserve all the happiness in the world, Phoebe. And no matter where I am, I'll always be with you. Merry Christmas, my love. Forever yours, Ellie." The letter fell from Phoebe's hands as sobs racked her body. She clutched the necklace to her chest, tears soaking the soft wool of her jumper. "I love you," she choked out. "I love you, Ellie. I'm so sorry." As the night wore on, the snow continued to fall, and the world outside was silent. But Phoebe felt a warmth in her heart, a gentle presence that seemed to wrap around her like a familiar embrace. For the first time in years, she didn't feel so alone. And in the glow of the firelight, she slipped the necklace around her neck, vowing to carry Ellie's love with her always. The days that followed Christmas were a blur for Phoebe. The necklace never left her neck, its presence a soothing reminder of Ellie's love and of the courage she had lacked for so long. Each time she touched it, she felt Ellie's warmth, her laughter, her love. But Phoebe also felt the weight of regret, so heavy it seemed to press the air from her lungs. The letter from Ellie had brought clarity, but also questions. Who had the woman been who delivered it? And why had Ellie entrusted this gift to her? Phoebe couldn't let it end there. She needed answers and perhaps closure. The first step was finding the woman who had come to her door. Phoebe remembered the bright red coat, the calm voice. She'd said she was a friend of Ellie's. But Phoebe had never known Ellie to mention anyone like her. She picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts, hesitating before pressing the call button for Ellie's brother, Mark. "Phoebe." Mark answered, his voice tinged with surprise. "Hi, Mark. I know this is sudden, but could we meet? There's something I need to ask you about Ellie." There was a pause before he spoke. "Of course. Tomorrow." The next day they met at a cozy cafe downtown. Mark looked older than she remembered, his eyes shadowed with the grief they both shared. "I miss her every day," he said quietly after they'd exchanged greetings. "Me too," Phoebe whispered. "Mark, there's something I need to know. On Christmas Eve, a woman brought me a letter from Ellie. She said Ellie had left it with her to deliver to me if anything happened. Do you know who she might be?" Mark frowned, considering. "A letter?" He shook his head. "Ellie didn't mention anything to me, but she had a lot of friends I didn't know. After she moved, she got really involved in the community. Maybe it was one of them." "What community?" Phoebe pressed. Mark smiled faintly. "She joined a group for women supporting women in relationships, especially LGBTQ women. She said it gave her strength, that it helped her come to terms with everything that happened between you two." Phoebe's heart ached. Ellie had faced her pain alone, while she'd run from it. She was brave, Mark added. She wanted to be there for others, even when she was hurting. "Do you know where the group meets?" Phoebe asked, her voice trembling. Mark nodded. "Yeah, I can send you the address." That evening, Phoebe stood outside a modest building with a hand-painted sign reading Lighthouse Women's Collective. Her heart pounded as she climbed the steps and opened the door. Inside, a warm and inviting space greeted her. A few women sat in a circle, chatting over tea. Phoebe scanned the room until her eyes landed on a familiar figure, the woman in the red coat. The woman spotted her and smiled gently. "I wondered if you'd come." Phoebe approached, her nerves knotting. "You delivered Ellie's letter to me. I need to know more." The woman gestured to a pair of chairs. "Sit with me." They settled into the chairs, and the woman introduced herself. "My name is Clara. Ellie was part of this group. She was extraordinary, full of light, even when she was struggling." Phoebe nodded, her throat tight. "Why did she trust you with the letter?" Clara hesitated before speaking. "Ellie talked about you often. She loved you more than anything, Phoebe, but she knew she couldn't make you love her back. When she got sick..." Phoebe's breath caught. "Sick?" Clara's eyes softened. "Ellie had been fighting cancer for months. She didn't want to burden you. She thought you'd moved on, and she wanted you to be happy." Phoebe felt like the air had been knocked out of her. "She was sick, and I didn't even know." "She didn't want you to," Clara said gently. "She thought it was her way of protecting you." Tears streamed down Phoebe's face. "She didn't need to protect me. I loved her. I was just too scared to admit it." Clara reached for Phoebe's hand. "Then honor her love by living without fear. Love as fiercely as she did." That night, Phoebe returned home with a new resolve. Ellie's love had been unwavering, even when she'd been at her weakest. It was time for Phoebe to be strong, for Ellie and for herself. Sitting by the fire once more, she clasped the snowflake necklace and whispered, "I'll make you proud, Ellie. I'll carry your love forward. Always." And for the first time she felt a glimmer of hope piercing through the sorrow, as if Ellie's light was guiding her, one step at a time.